From the moment human civilization began to calculate its progress in numbers, wealth and poverty became markers of power and vulnerability. Gross domestic product, or GDP, is one of the most familiar measures, a vast calculation of all the goods and services produced in a country within a year. But when divided by the number of people, adjusted for purchasing power, it reveals something more human: how much, on average, each citizen might be said to command. It is not a perfect measure, but it is a telling one. And through it, we see some nations of the modern world left trailing in economic darkness, struggling against forces both historic and present. Today, we journey across continents, across histories, and into the very heart of human endurance, as we explore the 10 poorest countries in the world by GDP per capita. This is not a list of shame, nor a spectacle of suffering, but a reflection on resilience, how societies persevere when the scales of wealth are so unevenly tipped. We begin in Africa, a continent of extraordinary natural riches, yet home to many of the world's poorest nations. And our first story takes us to the youngest country on earth. South Sudan. Born in 2011, after decades of bitter conflict with Sudan, it entered the global stage full of promise. Oil beneath its soil seemed to offer the hope of prosperity. But independence was swiftly followed by civil war, corruption, and internal division. Entire villages were displaced, families torn apart, children grew up in camps instead of homes. The economy, almost entirely reliant on oil, collapsed with each disruption of pipelines and each outbreak of violence. Today, South Sudan sits at the bottom of the world's economic ladder. Yet amid its swamps and savannas, there are stories of resilience. Cattle herders continue ancient traditions, women till small plots of land for maize and sorghum, and vast migrations of antelope remind the world that nature still flourishes where human governance falters. South Sudan is poor in GDP, but rich in endurance. From South Sudan we move to the heart of East Africa, where rolling hills and green fields disguise a story of scarcity. Burundi. It is one of the most densely populated countries on the continent, and land here is life. Every hill is terraced, every field cultivated. Coffee, its main export, is cultivated by smallholder farmers who work dawn to dusk for meager earnings. Political crises have long scarred the nation, undermining trust and stability. With little industry, limited infrastructure, and chronic shortages of energy, Burundi's economy has remained fragile. But listen to the rhythms of its drum traditions, the songs of its people, and you hear resilience louder than despair. Burundians build from little, weaving culture and community into strength where money fails. Heading westward into the forests and savannas of Central Africa, we arrive in a country the size of France, but with almost none of its wealth. The Central African Republic. This nation, though blessed with gold, diamonds, and timber, has been scarred by coups, rebellions, and cycles of violence. Its roads are few, its hospitals underfunded, its schools struggling. Many communities rely on subsistence farming, while diamonds flow illegally out of the country, enriching others while leaving the people behind. Armed groups control swaths of territory, while international peacekeepers attempt to stabilize what remains. And yet, life continues. Children play by riversides, women gather firewood, men fish with handmade nets. In the shadow of fragility, people continue to live, love, and hope. From Central Africa, we journey to a landlocked nation known as the warm heart of Africa. Malawi. Nestled beside Lake Malawi, one of the great freshwater lakes of the world, this nation is picturesque yet fragile. Most Malawians depend on rain-fed agriculture, vulnerable to every drought and flood. Tobacco has long been the leading cash crop, but global demand shrinks while climate stresses intensify. Electricity is limited, industry sparse, and poverty widespread. And yet, Malawi's people radiate warmth. From fishermen casting nets into the lake at dawn, to farmers coaxing maize from tired soil, to children laughing as they carry water home, there is a spirit of community that statistics cannot measure. Our journey now moves east, to the Indian Ocean's shores. Mozambique. Once a Portuguese colony, it emerged from independence only to fall into a devastating civil war. Today, despite its reserves of natural gas and minerals, much of Mozambique remains impoverished. Cyclones sweep in from the sea, displacing thousands and destroying years of progress in a single night. Insurgencies in the north disrupt gas projects that might have lifted the economy. Villages struggle with hunger, while cities grow with informal settlements. Yet Mozambique is also a land of extraordinary beauty, its long coastline dotted with fishing boats, its culture alive with music and dance. Poverty presses hard here, but hope persists with each generation determined to survive. From Mozambique we turn northeast, to a nation whose name has become synonymous with both hardship and resilience. Somalia. Decades of conflict left its institutions shattered, its people scattered in one of the world's largest diasporas. Drought and famine stalk its rural communities, piracy once haunted its seas, and extremist violence has scarred its towns. GDP per capita remains among the lowest in the world. Yet within Somalia, trade continues, driven by entrepreneurs who build markets in the ashes of war. Pastoralists still roam with their camels across arid lands, guided by ancient knowledge of where to find water. Somali poetry and oral tradition flourish, a reminder that culture survives even when infrastructure does not. Heading into the heart of Africa, we come to a giant, a country as vast as Western Europe, as rich in resources as almost any place on earth. And yet, paradoxically, among the poorest. The Democratic Republic of the Congo. Its soil contains cobalt, copper, gold, diamonds, and coltan, minerals that power the modern world. Yet its people remain trapped in poverty. Decades of dictatorship, followed by wars that drew in half of Africa, left millions dead and institutions weak. In eastern Congo, armed groups battle for control of mines, while corruption siphons wealth away from the public good. Kinshasa, its capital, pulses with energy, music, and color, but beyond the city many villages lack schools, clinics, even passable roads. Here, the resource curse is no abstraction, it is a lived reality. But Congolese culture, with its music, art, and sheer vitality, defies despair. From Congo, we move to the west coast of Africa, to a nation that bears the scars of conflict yet strives for renewal. Liberia. Founded in the 19th century by freed slaves from the United States, Liberia carries a unique history. But the 20th and early 21st centuries saw two brutal civil wars that shattered its economy and society. Recovery was underway when Ebola struck in 2014, devastating both lives and livelihoods. Today, poverty persists, infrastructure struggles, and corruption remains a challenge. Yet Liberians rebuild, street by street, farm by farm. Children return to schools, communities rebuild markets, and music fills the air once again. From Liberia, our path takes us back across the Red Sea to a nation long regarded as one of the cradles of civilization. Yemen. Once a prosperous land of traders and coffee, Yemen has been ravaged by years of war. Airstrikes, blockades, and internal divisions have shattered its economy, leading to what the United Nations calls the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Millions are food insecure, hospitals struggle, and infrastructure lies in ruins. GDP per capita has plummeted, and yet, Yemen resilience is legendary. Families gather to share what little they have, poets still compose verses, and traditions endure. The mountains of Yemen, the narrow streets of Sana'a, and the strength of its people remind us that even amid devastation, culture cannot be erased. Finally, we turn to an island unlike any other, Madagascar. Separated from mainland Africa millions of years ago, its ecosystems evolved in isolation, producing baobab, lemurs, and a dazzling array of life found nowhere else. But Madagascar's people live largely in poverty, dependent on subsistence agriculture vulnerable to cyclones and drought. Infrastructure is weak, and many villages are isolated by poor roads. Despite this, Madagascar culture thrives. In music, in dance, in the deep respect for the land and its unique creatures. Poverty weighs heavily here, but Madagascar's biodiversity and the pride of its people remain unmatched treasures. These are the 10 poorest countries in the world by GDP per capita. Each name on the list tells a story of challenges: war and peace, drought and abundance, corruption and resilience, despair and hope. But beyond the statistics, beyond the rankings, what unites these nations is the human will to endure. GDP may measure goods and services, but it does not measure courage. It does not count the laughter of children, the solidarity of neighbors, or the determination of farmers who coax life from tired soil. The world can learn from these nations. They remind us that poverty is not just a number, it is a challenge to humanity's conscience. And resilience is not just survival. It is proof that even in the harshest conditions, the human spirit refuses to be broken. As we conclude our journey across the 10 poorest countries on earth, let us not see them only through the lens of deprivation. Let us see them as places of possibility, of people whose stories matter, whose futures can yet be transformed. Poverty is not destiny, it is a condition that can be changed. With justice, with investment, with compassion, and with the recognition that wealth should not be the privilege of a few, but the right of all. This is the story of the world's poorest nations, not of their weakness, but of their strength. And in their struggle, we glimpse not just their humanity, but our shared responsibility.